The room is quiet now. Outside your window, the world is dimming, and the slow rhythm of night is wrapping itself gently around your thoughts. The last echoes of the day soften like a lullaby. Somewhere in the hush between heartbeats, you begin to slip into that in-between space, not quite asleep, not quite awake. It's in this stillness that your mind becomes light enough to drift. Tonight, we'll journey through something curious, a question that seems simple but carries strange consequences. What happens to time at the speed of light? You won't need equations or diagrams, only a calm mind and a touch of wonder. This isn't a lesson, it's a quiet unfolding, a thought you can walk beside until it dissolves softly into your dreams. A story not with characters, but with realities that almost feel imaginary. Before we begin, I'd love to know something about you. Where are you listening from? And what time is it right now in your part of the world? Share it, if you'd like, in the comments below. Together, we form a constellation, not of stars, but of people falling asleep under the same sky, each in a different corner of time. You are not alone in your curiosity or your quietness. You're lying in bed. Maybe the curtains are drawn, maybe not. You notice how light still slips through the gaps, how it lands without asking on the edge of your blanket or the corner of the floor. It's always so fast, this light, so familiar, so normal. But have you ever really thought about it? Not what it is, but how it behaves. Light doesn't crawl, but it doesn't pause. It arrives, instantly it seems. The second a light switch flips, there it is, not creeping across the room, not building momentum, but fully formed, present. And yet that presence is strange. The sun, for instance, is 8 minutes away. If it disappeared now, burned out, exploded, vanished, you wouldn't know until 8 minutes later. So does that mean the sunlight pouring through your window is already 8 minutes old? Or is that idea misleading? From the sun's perspective, or rather from the light's perspective, is there any delay at all? What does it mean to be 8 minutes old anyway if you are light? Because something wild happens when we talk about speed. Not ordinary speed, not a car, not a rocket, but the ultimate speed, the speed of light, 300,000 kilometers every second. At that speed, our equations say something curious. Time stops. For light, there is no ticking clock, no past, no future. It departs, it arrives, but it does not wait. This idea isn't just poetic, it's embedded in the structure of our physical theories. Light, we say, moves through space, but it does not experience time. From its point of view, if it even has one, there is no in-between. A photon born in the core of the sun travels 150 million kilometers to reach your skin, and yet, from its frame of reference, that journey takes no time at all. Emission and absorption become one. But what does that mean? Is it just a mathematical artifact, a strange result that we shouldn't think about too much? Or is it telling us something deeper about the nature of time, about the limits of our perception? If something can exist without the passage of time, is time truly fundamental? Or is it just a shadow cast by something we don't yet understand? Now imagine for a moment that you could ride along that beam of light, not beside it in a spaceship. No, you become the light. You slip into its motion. You pass through walls and glass and vacuum. You are the photon. From this perspective, no time elapses between your beginning and your end. You do not age, you do not move in the way we understand movement. You exist only in two places, the start and the finish. No journey, just presence. And that presence feels deeply alien to our experience. We are creatures of time. We feel its flow in our bones. We measure it in birthdays, in deadlines, in sunsets. Even now, as you lie here listening, your cells are aging. Your heart is keeping rhythm. Time surrounds you. But light? Light seems to float above it, unanchored. Is it fair, though, to say light doesn't experience time? Or are we projecting our need for experience onto something that doesn't share it? Maybe light doesn't need time because it doesn't contain memory or thought or decay. It is pure movement, pure connection, not living, not dying, just there. And if that's true, then what else might exist beyond time? What else might be moving through the universe, invisible to our clocks? Could time be more like a lens, one we peer through, but which doesn't capture the whole picture? Could it be that time is a property of slowness, of mass, of limitation, and that in speed, in weightlessness, it evaporates? Maybe time isn't something that's always there. Maybe it's something that arises only when you can't move fast enough to escape it, like standing in the rain. Only those too slow get wet. Light then is always dry, always slipping through, always beyond. And that leaves us with a question, one that flickers faintly as your eyes begin to close. If light experiences no time, then what is it really experiencing at all? If there is no duration, no before or after, can it even be said to experience anything? We're so used to stitching moments together, stringing thoughts like beads along a thread, that the idea of existing outside that sequence feels impossible. But light doesn't seem to need that sequence. It doesn't wait. It doesn't hesitate. It doesn't move from one frame of reference to another the way we do, slowly with friction. Instead, it just is, like a word that's spoken and heard at the same instant, as if the air had no distance in it at all. Let's slow down for a moment. Imagine you're holding a flashlight in a dark room. You flick it on. Instantly, a beam stretches across the space, hitting the wall. Now freeze time, not in the metaphorical sense, but literally. If you could pause the universe just as you turned it on, what would you see? You might expect the beam to travel gradually, but it doesn't. The front of that light beam is already there, on the wall, before you even think about blinking. And yet, it took time to get there, didn't it? To you, yes, but not to the light. This is one of the strangest consequences of Einstein's theory of special relativity. As something moves faster and faster, time slows down for it relative to a stationary observer. And if you could move at exactly the speed of light, which no object with mass can, then your clock would stop completely. Time would become meaningless. Your journey would begin and end in the same instant, even if it spanned 1 billion light years. And yet, we're talking about light here, something we treat as a wave, a particle, a flicker. Does it make sense to say that light has a perspective? Is there a point of view to something with no mass, no internal clock, no experience in the way we understand it? Probably not. But framing it this way forces us to confront something uncomfortable. Time might not be as absolute as we assume. If time can stretch and compress depending on how fast you move, then it's not a constant background ticking away. It's dynamic, elastic. It adapts to your motion and your gravity. It becomes something woven into the fabric of space itself. And yet, light, the fastest thing in that fabric, seems to exist along its edges, like a seam where time unravels. This makes the photon, the fundamental particle of light, a kind of enigma. It's the messenger between atoms, the reason we see, the carrier of energy and information, and yet it never grows old, never decays, never lingers. A photon created in the heart of a distant galaxy 1 billion years ago arrives in your eye tonight, and to it, if it could feel anything, it would be as if no time had passed at all, like blinking without ever opening your eyes. How can we begin to understand such a reality? Maybe we start by looking not at light, but at ourselves, because our sense of time is deeply biological. Our hearts beat, our minds wander, our bodies age. We need time to function, to store memories, to make choices, to understand change. We mark it with calendars, clocks, even wrinkles. To be human is to be temporal, but to be light, that might be to exist outside the realm of aging and forgetting altogether. And this contrast raises deeper questions. Is time something real out there in the universe, ticking regardless of who's watching? Or is it a framework, something constructed like a map to help us understand change? If light doesn't participate in time, then perhaps time isn't universal. Perhaps it's more like a local phenomenon, a kind of scaffolding we need to make sense of our world. And without that scaffolding, maybe the universe still stands. But here's the twist. Even though light doesn't seem to feel time, it defines it for us. Our clocks use light to measure duration. Atomic clocks tick by counting vibrations of light waves. GPS satellites must account for the time-dilating effects of motion and gravity on signals that travel at light speed. In a strange paradox, light, which exists outside of time, is the very thing we use to measure it. So is light above time, or is it time's anchor? Maybe it's both. Or maybe we're asking the wrong kinds of questions. Maybe our language, built on cause and effect, isn't equipped to describe a realm where those concepts blur. Maybe we're like fish trying to imagine the sky, capable of glimpsing it, but not quite grasping how it holds together. Because the more we examine light, the less it behaves like anything we can intuit. It's a particle, but it spreads like a wave. It moves in straight lines, but it bends around gravity. It's energy, but it has no rest, and always, it moves without pause. And yet, despite its speed, light has limits. It cannot go faster. It defines the speed limit of the cosmos. Nothing, no signal, no object, no event can outrun it. Why? What makes this limit so fundamental, so unbreakable? Why is it that as you approach the speed of light, your mass increases, your energy requirements explode, and your time slows to a crawl? It's as if the universe is guarding a door only light can pass through, and the rest of us can only knock on. But what lies beyond that door? What would it feel like to step into a frame of reference where time is frozen, space collapses, and distance vanishes? What would it mean to exist not within time, but outside it? And if light exists outside of time, then where does it go between its beginning and its end? From our perspective, we see light travel from the sun to earth, from a lamp to your book, from a distant star to the back of your eye. We measure that journey in seconds, minutes, even millennia. But if time doesn't pass for the light itself, is there really a between at all? What happens to the idea of travel when the traveler experiences no passage at all? It's as if light doesn't move through space and time. It connects one point to another, stitching them together like thread, passing through two islets in a single motionless moment. This thought begins to stretch the mind. We think of motion as something that unfolds. You start here, you go there, something happens along the way. You look out the window of a train, you feel the rumble of progress. But light doesn't glance out the window. It doesn't feel the rumble. It doesn't pass scenery. From its own view, though it's strange to even use that word, it was emitted and absorbed at the same instant. No path, just presence. To wrap our minds around this, we have to visit a thought experiment often used in physics, the light clock. Imagine a simple device, two mirrors facing each other with a photon bouncing between them. Every time it hits a mirror, it's a tick, a steady rhythm. Now place this clock in motion, say on a train. To someone standing on the ground, watching the train go by, the photon no longer moves just up and down. Instead, it traces a diagonal path, like a zigzag. That diagonal is longer than the straight line, so it takes more time between ticks. And yet, to someone on the train, inside the moving frame, the photon is still bouncing straight up and down. No extra path, no delay. The clock ticks normally. This is time dilation, the effect where moving clocks run slower from the perspective of an outside observer. The faster the motion, the more time stretches. And at the speed of light, the clock would stop ticking entirely. That's the crucial piece. The light clock can't tick if you are light. But the deeper implication is this: light does not experience change, and without change, how can there be time? Change is the heart of time as we understand it. The growing of trees, the shifting of shadows, the beating of hearts. We measure time by what alters, but a photon never alters. Its energy, its speed, its identity, all constant. In a universe of flickering candles and spinning planets, light alone does not flicker or spin, it only arrives. So what does this make of our idea of speed? After all, speed is defined as distance over time. But if time doesn't pass for light, how can it have speed at all? This is one of those philosophical corners where physics seems to fold in on itself. From our perspective, light travels 300,000 kilometers every second. From light's perspective, if such a thing can be imagined, it doesn't travel at all. The universe compresses, distance vanishes, time ceases, everything collapses into an event, not a duration. And so, the photon, our faithful courier of vision, becomes something paradoxical. It moves at the fastest possible speed, yet never feels that movement. It experiences no delay, no pause, no sequence. And because of that, it sits at the boundary between what we can perceive and what we can only theorize. A ghost at the edge of causality. A flicker without a before or after. This raises uncomfortable questions. If light can connect 2 points in space-time without being in between, what does that mean for the nature of cause and effect? We rely on the notion that things happen in order. A causes B, which leads to C. But if events can be linked without time passing for the link itself, how solid is that sequence? Is it absolute or just a convenient illusion? Maybe our entire understanding of sequence is something that only applies to slow things, to massive things, to us. We're creatures of lag. We take time to think, to decide, to react. We're trapped in a frame where everything takes effort, where light is something that always escapes just ahead of us. But what if, instead, light is showing us what existence looks like beyond the trap? A glimpse of something timeless, stretched taut across a world that insists on time. And here's another twist. According to quantum theory, photons don't even take one path from source to destination. They take all possible paths, every curve, every angle, every impossible detour, and they cancel out through interference until only the shortest route remains. This path integral idea suggests that even our neat picture of a light beam moving in a straight line is an approximation. Underneath it is something even more abstract, more bewildering. A totality of possibilities that resolves into an instant. Not a journey, but a choice that was never made. So perhaps, in some strange sense, light doesn't move through the universe at all. Maybe it selects a route only in hindsight, or maybe it never selects anything. Maybe it simply exists as a bridge between events without knowing that those events are separated, because again, separation implies time, and time is something light simply does not contain. But if light lacks time, how can it be involved in anything? How can it enter your eyes, trigger a nerve, create a perception? How can it power photosynthesis, charge a solar cell, warm your skin? Does an effect require time, or are we seeing only one side of the puzzle? What if light doesn't operate within time, but creates time through interaction? What if its very act of arriving, of striking something that does experience time, is what generates the sensation of change? Maybe light doesn't need time. Maybe it gives time to the rest of us. And if that's true, if light brings time into being by touching things that remember, that decay, that wait, then is light really timeless? Or is it the origin of time itself? Or is it the origin of time itself? That thought lingers, quiet and provocative, like the final note of a melody that doesn't quite resolve. If light creates time only when it touches something slow, something massive, something bound by memory and motion, then perhaps light isn't timeless in the way we first assumed. Perhaps it is time's sculptor, not its prisoner. Not inside the river, but shaping its banks, not carried by the current, but whispering it into flow. But what would it mean for time to be something created, not given? Something emergent rather than inherent? In our everyday lives, time feels like a stage. It's where everything plays out. You eat breakfast, you wait for the kettle to boil, you age, you plan, you remember. Time is the ground beneath your feet. But if light doesn't need that ground, if it moves without it, then maybe the stage itself is something optional, something only built when the actors step onto it. Let's return to something familiar, a sunrise. You stand in the early quiet, watching the sky shift from gray to gold. The sunlight crawls across your skin, and you feel it, warm, new, ancient. That light left the sun over 8 minutes ago. It traveled through the void, untouched, unfeeling, until it reached you. And in that moment of contact, something happened. Not just warmth, not just visibility, but sequence. Your brain receives photons, translates them into images, triggers reactions. A chain begins. A rhythm reawakens. Light doesn't carry time, but it catalyzes it. Now imagine the universe without any light. No stars, no warmth, no illumination. Not just dark, but inert. No signals passing from one particle to another, no clocks ticking, no differences being made. Could there still be time in such a place? Or would it lie dormant, waiting for something or someone to bring it back into play? This is where the layers begin to spiral deeper, because in physics, time isn't just a background variable. It's tied to energy, to motion, to causality, and in relativity, it's braided together with space, forming a unified fabric. You can't bend space without affecting time. You can't accelerate without altering your temporal experience. And light, again, rides right along the edges of that fabric. It moves as if gliding along a tensionless thread, never dipping into the wells that bend other things, never aging, never slowing. And yet, it defines the shape of the fabric. In Einstein's equations, light's trajectory helps define what straightness even means in a curved spacetime. It tells us how to draw the lines that connect events. In a way, it is the very ruler we use to measure how spacetime bends. It may not participate in time, but it draws the grid on which time unfolds. So again, we're caught between roles. Is light an outsider, a mere observer of time's performance? Or is it the quiet conductor behind the curtain, setting the tempo no one else dares to challenge? Consider this. When you move faster, your time slows down relative to someone standing still. This is not just theory, it's observed. GPS satellites experience time differently than we do on Earth, and their systems are corrected accordingly. The faster you go, the more time stretches. And if you could reach light speed, which you can't unless you have no mass, time would grind to a complete halt. Your heartbeat would freeze. Your thoughts would stop. You wouldn't be aware of arriving because there would be no before to compare it to. But this invites a haunting question. If you experienced no time during your journey, did the journey even occur for you? Can you speak of motion without duration? Or are we so deeply attached to the unfolding of events that we cannot accept existence without sequence? It may help to think of photographs, still images, each one frozen, timeless, self-contained. When you flip through them slowly, you create motion, you generate the illusion of time. But what if reality, too, is a kind of flip book, a series of frozen snapshots, each connected not by time itself, but by something deeper, something like light, linking one frame to the next without ever pausing inside them? That might sound like pure speculation, but in certain interpretations of quantum mechanics and cosmology, time is not fundamental. It's an emergent property, something that arises only when enough change accumulates, or when enough information becomes distinguishable. Without that change, there is only stasis, a moment with no neighbors, a stillness so complete it has no concept of before. So again, light becomes the hinge, not slow enough to mark time, not massive enough to fall into its flow, but fast enough, empty enough, to hint at what existence might look like when stripped of that slow, steady rhythm we call aging. Light doesn't tell a story in sequence. It arrives as a single word, spoken all at once, echoing forever, only because we are slow enough to hear it that way. Maybe that's why we can't travel at light speed, not just physically, but cognitively, philosophically. Our minds are built on chains of thought. This leads to that, which causes this. If we strip that chain away, would we still have a mind, or would we become something else entirely, something that just is? We often dream of moving faster, of traveling faster than light, of reaching the stars in moments. But perhaps what we really long for isn't speed, but freedom from the weight, from the passage, from the wear and tear of time. Light has that freedom, and yet light has no memory, no future, no becoming, only presence. So we're left with a paradox. We want what light has, the timelessness, the immediacy, the release. But if we had it, would we still be us? If there were no time, would there still be a self to experience it? Or is the self, this quiet thread of identity, something that can only exist because of time's forward march? You know who you are because you remember, you reflect, you project. You have a past that feeds into a present, and a present that looks toward a future. Strip away that order, and what remains? Would you still feel like you, or would the idea of you dissolve into something unrecognizable, a frozen echo, or a flash without form? The more we peer into this question, the more it pulls us into a kind of philosophical vertigo, because we're not just talking about physics anymore. We're talking about consciousness, about perception, about the very nature of what it means to exist. And light, in its peculiar detachment from time, offers a mirror, or perhaps a void, that reflects these questions back at us, not with answers, but with silence. Think of a photon emitted from a dying star, billions of light years away. It travels through intergalactic emptiness, passing galaxies, brushing against gravitational fields, slipping across the universe without resistance. From our perspective, that journey takes eons. But for the photon, if such a thing could be said to perceive, that emission and its final absorption, perhaps in your retina as you gaze through a telescope, are one and the same. No middle, no unfolding, just two ends touching. And yet, we live in the middle. We live in the unfolding. Our lives are built on the space between origin and arrival. We are creatures of anticipation and memory. We breathe in the now only because we are aware of the then and the soon. The idea of existing without that space, of compressing one's entire timeline into a single, eternal moment, feels alien, not peaceful, not transcendent, just absent. Still, there's something compelling about that absence. We often speak of wanting to live in the present, to quiet the noise of regret and worry, to anchor ourselves in the now. And light, paradoxically, may be the ultimate embodiment of now. Not the now that slips through your fingers, but the now that never moves. The eternal present, not stretched, not rushed, not lost. But could we survive that kind of presence? Or is the value of now precisely in its impermanence, the way it leads to another now and another, like steps in a corridor we can never stop walking? Light has no corridor. It leaps from door to door with no hallway in between. And that's why it's so hard to grasp, because we are the hallway. We are the in-between. So what happens when we try to follow light, not just in theory, but in the thought experiment of imagination? You close your eyes. You imagine accelerating, faster and faster, until the world around you begins to blur. Colors shift. Time outside your vessel stretches like taffy pulled thin. Inside, the ticking of your clock slows. Your heartbeat drags. Thoughts become viscous. Eventually, they stop. At the speed of light, nothing inside moves. No neuron fires. No breath flows. No clock ticks. The concept of sequence evaporates. You are frozen, but not in ice, in stasis, in stillness so deep it no longer feels like waiting. But here's the contradiction. In that frozen state, nothing changes. So is there still awareness? Or does awareness require change? The difference between one state and the next. The comparison between what was and what is. If nothing moves, nothing alters, then perhaps there is no consciousness at light speed. Just presence, just position, no one home to feel the stillness. And yet, we're here, pondering this from our limited, low-speed frame. We can't ride the beam, but we can imagine it. And in that imagining, we glimpse a boundary, the edge of what minds like ours can comprehend. The closer we approach that boundary, the more time loses its grip. It stretches, it slows, until it vanishes into a point. This vanishing isn't just an abstraction, it has real implications. The speed of light defines causality in our universe. It is the cosmic speed limit not because the universe forbids faster travel out of spite, but because going faster would break the order of events. Causes might follow effects. Information could arrive before it was sent. The fabric of logic itself would fray. Time, in its delicate flow, would be torn. So the speed of light doesn't just define motion, it defines what's possible, what's real, what can happen when. It's the perimeter fence around all coherent experience. And beyond that fence, at that edge, lies the photon, not in rebellion, but an exception. It exists outside of our flow, not to defy it, but to define it by contrast. Without light, we might not even know there is a flow. Without that one thing that moves but does not age, we would have no benchmark, no beacon. Light then becomes our paradoxical teacher, the timeless traveler showing us what time is, not by participating, but by abstaining, not by changing, but by being changeless. It's no wonder, then, that ancient cultures treated light as divine. The sun, the stars, the glow of fire, these were seen not just as sources of warmth and life, but of insight, of truth, of permanence. And perhaps in their own way, those cultures were right, because even now, in all our scientific precision, we return to light to understand our deepest limits. And it returns to us, unchanged, to remind us what lies at the border of perception. So as you lie there, letting your breath slow and your thoughts unravel, consider this. To you, time moves. The seconds tick, the night deepens. But above you, photons fall, some from lamps, some from distant galaxies, and not one of them feels the weight. And if light doesn't feel the weight, then how do we know waiting is even real? Is time something built into the fabric of reality? Or is it just a trick played on slow creatures like us, organisms bound by metabolism, rotation, and decay? We feel time because we need to, because life unfolds in sequences. Your heartbeat comes after your breath. Your thoughts follow your senses. Hunger follows energy loss. From the first flicker of awareness to the last blink, life is a rhythm, one moment giving way to the next. But outside of that rhythm, what remains? Let's step back and consider the notion of mass. Objects with mass cannot reach the speed of light. The closer they try, the heavier they become, demanding more and more energy to push forward until that energy requirement becomes infinite. Mass, then, is not just inertia in space, it's inertia in time. A kind of gravitational tether that keeps you inside the river of seconds, unable to leap out. The heavier you are, the more you must experience time, the more you are subject to its unfolding. And light? Light has no mass. It is the ultimate exception. Not slowed, not tethered, not held. It doesn't travel through time because there is nothing holding it in the stream. No resistance, no drag. And maybe that's why it moves at the maximum possible speed. Not because it tries, but because there's nothing holding it back. Speed, in this sense, isn't effort, it's freedom. So, what if time isn't something that flows like water, but something that sticks like molasses? A viscous medium clinging to mass, making everything slow and sequential. To experience time, then, is to feel that stickiness, to carry the drags of being. Light has no drag. It slides across the cosmos untouched, not because it's fast, but because it's free of what binds the rest of us. But that brings us to a curious place. If time is felt only by the things that have mass, by atoms and cells and brains, then what does that say about time's objectivity? Is time really universal, or is it a local phenomenon, like fog on a mountaintop or heat near a fire? Does it permeate the universe, or does it only emerge when certain conditions are met, like mass, like entropy, like memory? And if it only emerges in certain places, then we have to confront an unnerving idea. The team may not be fundamental. It may not be stitched into the core of reality. It may be a symptom, a side effect, something that comes into being only when other things interact in the right way. This is not just poetic speculation. In physics, particularly in some interpretations of quantum gravity, time isn't treated as a basic ingredient. Instead, it's something that arises from deeper, timeless rules, like temperature emerging from countless molecules in motion. You can't point to a single molecule and say that's temperature, but together they generate heat. Similarly, time might not exist for the fundamental components of reality, but when they combine, when they interact, when they form complexity, then time appears. And again, light stands apart because it doesn't form structures, it doesn't bind, it doesn't sit still long enough to remember or to change. It doesn't interact the way matter does. It passes through, reflects, refracts, but it doesn't linger. It doesn't store information about its journey. It doesn't build memory. And maybe that's why it doesn't build time. So when we say time slows down near the speed of light, what do we really mean? It means that the sequence of events, as measured by an outside observer, begins to stretch. It means that clocks tick slower, processes unfold more gradually, and when you reach light speed, that unfolding stops altogether. There is no more process, no more waiting, no more becoming, only being, only the endpoints of action with nothing in between. But then, is light even moving? If it experiences no passage between departure and arrival, can we say it traveled? Or is the idea of motion itself a consequence of time, a story we invent to describe change when change requires time to have meaning? This leads to another unsettling thought. Maybe light doesn't move at all. Maybe what we perceive as motion is really the collapse of possibility into event. A photon doesn't go from point A to point B. It simply exists in such a way that point A and point B are connected, and our experience of that connection, spread out in time, is what we call movement. But to light, there was no such unfolding, just a relation between two things, just a bond without a bridge. And if light doesn't move in time, then where does it exist? Not in the past because it doesn't age, not in the future because it never anticipates, not in the present because that presumes change. Maybe it exists along a line perpendicular to time, not in time, but orthogonal to it. A direction we cannot see, but that shapes everything we know. This perspective casts a new shadow on the way we talk about causality. We think of causes preceding effects. We drop a stone and it splashes. We speak and sound reaches an ear. But if the signal, the light, the sound, the touch doesn't experience that order, then perhaps the order is not absolute. Perhaps it's stitched from our slowness, our memory, our insistence on before and after, but not from anything intrinsic. So where does that leave us? Maybe with a more humble sense of our place in the universe. We are not clocks ticking against a universal drumbeat. We are bubbles of delay, pools of slowness in a sea of instant connections. We make time not because the cosmos demands it, but because we cannot function without it. Our thoughts need time to form. Our lives need it to mean. And maybe that's the answer to the question that began this entire drift. Does time exist at the speed of light? Maybe not. But maybe it doesn't need to, because light doesn't ask for meaning the way we do. It doesn't build stories. It doesn't mark birthdays. It doesn't compare what was to what is. Meaning, for us, is woven tightly into time's fabric, into patterns, consequences, expectations. We find comfort in the progression, in knowing that after this moment comes another. But light has no such comfort, no need for sequence. It simply is. Without anticipation, without regret, without becoming, just being. So if time is a structure that emerges for those of us who move too slowly to escape it, then what does it mean that we cannot even approach the boundary of light speed? That no matter how hard we try, building faster engines, hurling probes deeper into space, we're always kept on this side of the line. There's something poetic in that barrier, something protective, almost like nature has drawn a chalk outline around the realm where experience still matters. Beyond it lies a place where change no longer happens, where all the things we recognize as life, thought, and memory begin to unravel. In that sense, light speed is more than a limit of velocity. It is a limit of knowability, a threshold where concepts break down, not because they are false, but because they no longer apply. Asking what a photon feels is like asking what a shadow remembers. It's a category mistake. Light doesn't feel, it doesn't perceive, it doesn't remember. And maybe that's what makes it so unsettling, that something so vital, so ever-present, can be so utterly alien to our way of being. And yet, despite that alienness, light is how we see. It defines the visible. It shapes the surfaces of the world. It reveals. Every detail you've ever noticed, every crack in the sidewalk, every flicker in a lover's eye, was made knowable by light. Even though it doesn't experience the world, it brings the world into your experience. It is paradoxically the thing that lets us perceive change, even while it remains unchanged itself. That role, as both outsider and enabler, gives light a strange sort of dual identity. It doesn't participate in time, yet it's the reason we know time passes. It doesn't remember, yet it's how we retrieve the past. Look at the stars. Some of their light has been traveling toward you since before Earth had continents. That ancient starlight arrives now, present in your eye, without having aged a second itself. And in catching it, you glimpse not just distance, but history. You are seeing something that for the photon never even took a journey. It simply existed at two ends, there and here. but those ends mean everything to us. We build telescopes to see further, not just across space, but backward in time. The further we look, the older the light we catch. And yet, from the light's non-perspective, there's no older at all. The Big Bang and the moment you blinked are not separated by time in the photon's frame. They are adjacent events. One touch across the deepest stretch of cosmic silence. This starts to shake the foundations of how we think. Because if time is something that only arises for us, for slow, massive creatures with clocks in our heads and pulses in our veins, then maybe reality itself isn't what we assume. Maybe time is a convenience, a useful mirage. Like longitude and latitude, it helps us locate ourselves, but it isn't the territory. It isn't the thing itself. And yet, what would we be without it? Strip away your memories, your anticipations, your unfolding thoughts. What's left? Would you be a flicker, a frozen still, or something more or less than you are now? Time isn't just something we experience. It's the scaffolding on which we build identity. The thing that holds the echo of what we were and the whisper of what we might become. So when we speak of light existing outside time, we're not just making a physical claim. We're brushing up against the edge of selfhood. We're daring to imagine a form of being that doesn't include all the scaffolds we lean on. Light is not alive. It does not suffer or rejoice. It does not wait or rush, but it shows us the world. It writes the shadows that prove we're still here. It paints the dawn that reminds us time is still moving. And maybe that's why we struggle with its nature, because in every way that matters to us, light behaves like a message, and messages imply intention. But light has no intention. It doesn't choose its path. It doesn't care whether it's seen. It simply propagates, indifferent and elegant. And yet, through that indifferent elegance, we glimpse something profound, a kind of purity we cannot touch. It's easy to envy that timelessness, to imagine that if we could only let go of thought, of memory, of change, we could become something freer, something clearer. But would we still be ourselves? Would we still feel wonder? Or would we vanish into the very clarity we hoped to reach? The speed of light, then, isn't just a number. It's a philosophical limit, a boundary not just of motion, but of identity. We can see it, calculate it, even use it, but we cannot touch it. We cannot become it, because to do so would mean letting go of the very medium that makes us who we are, time. So we orbit it instead, slowly, thoughtfully, bound to our seconds and minutes, even as we long for the simplicity on the other side. We chase the light not because we hope to catch it, but because in the chase we discover what it means to be slow, to be bound, to be human. And still, we wonder what would happen if we truly caught up. If somehow, in defiance of all physics, all equations, we reached light speed, not just with a machine, but with a mind, a presence, an awareness, would we step outside the arrow of time and become observers of all things at once? Or would we simply cease to be, not through destruction, but through transcendence into a state where being has no meaning, because meaning itself is built on difference, and difference requires time. Imagine for a moment that you could see the universe the way light does, not spread out across epochs, but compressed into a single, seamless image. Every star, every galaxy, every breath, every blink, all existing simultaneously in an eternal now. What would such a vision feel like? Could you even process it? Or would your very capacity for perception dissolve, unable to find a foothold in a world with no before and after? We often treat time as a line, a thread we move along, always forward. But what if it's not a line at all? What if it's a texture, a field, something that emerges only when movement becomes delayed, when particles begin to interact with resistance and inertia? If that's true, then perhaps light doesn't move through time because it doesn't need to. Its motion is so pure, so unopposed, that time never condenses around it. And yet, for all this timelessness, light is a bringer of change. It arrives and things shift. Flowers open, photoreceptors fire, solar panels awaken. The world brightens, not because light evolves, but because it touches things that do. And maybe that's the secret. Light doesn't change, but it induces change. It doesn't grow old, but it helps us grow. In this way, light becomes a kind of eternal observer, not with eyes or memory, but with effect. It records nothing, but leaves records everywhere. Every photograph, every painting, every memory formed from a face bathed in morning light. These are consequences of a photon's presence. It never stays, but it always marks. It never thinks, but it makes thinking possible. This begins to stretch into the realm of metaphysics. What does it mean for something to matter if it has no memory of its own significance? We matter because we can remember, because we can choose, because we can anticipate. But light is devoid of all that, and still it's fundamental, still it's necessary. It shapes everything, from the birth of stars to the first flickers of life on Earth, and yet it does so without ever lingering. Like a teacher who never speaks, but whose presence changes the course of everything. There's something humbling in that. We often assume that impact requires intention. That presence must come with perspective. But light reminds us that influence can be silent, invisible from the inside. You don't have to experience time to leave a mark within it. You don't have to be bound by it to define how it flows for everything else. Which brings us to gravity. Light, despite having no mass, is still affected by gravity. It bends near massive objects. It curves around stars, around black holes, tracing paths like threads pulled taut by unseen hands. This bending of light, gravitational lensing, reveals to us the curvature of spacetime. It shows us that space and time aren't static, but pliable, that they ripple and bend. And what bends them? Mass. And what traces their shape? Light. So even though light isn't part of the same temporal rhythm we are, it moves through the geometry of time's fabric. It obeys the curves. It follows the warps. It doesn't age along those paths, but it maps them. A photon can circle a black hole, perhaps endlessly, caught in a perfect orbit where no clock ticks. It sees the curve, but never the journey. It loops without memory, without progression, like a sentence always on the verge of being spoken. In this way, light becomes our guide, not by showing us how to be timeless, but by illuminating the shape of time itself, its paths, its contours, its traps. It reveals that time is not flat, not uniform, not universal. It is relative. It depends on where you are, how fast you move, how deeply you sit in gravity's well. And wherever we look to understand these variations, we find light there first, bending, scattering, redshifting, whispering the shape of the unseen. Even in the darkness, light leaves a trace, cosmic background radiation, The echo of the universe's birth surrounds us. It is invisible to our eyes, but it's there. A fossil light, barely above absolute zero, stretched by the expansion of time itself. It's the oldest thing we can detect, and yet, for the photons that carry that ancient message, no time has passed. They were there at the beginning, and they're here now. Not travelers, but bridges. So, what does it mean to exist within time when the very fabric you live in is stitched together by things that don't? Are we just passengers on a slow train watching the scenery shaped by something infinitely fast and infinitely still? Or are we, in some way, part of the fabric that requires the light, not to change it, but to reveal it? These are not questions science alone can answer. They live at the edge of physics, at the threshold of philosophy, and just beyond that, in the quiet places of wonder. They are the kinds of questions that linger in the mind as sleep begins to fold in, as thought slows, as time, for you, gently stretches. And maybe that's the answer. Maybe time exists because we're here to stretch it, to feel it pass, to notice the gap between one breath and the next, to turn light's arrival into memory, into meaning, into story. But still, the thought persists. What would happen if even meaning stopped unfolding? If the light arrived, unchanged as always, but there was no one slow enough to notice its passing, no mind to compare one instant to the next, no heart to beat the interval that gives the present its shape? Would the universe still move forward, or would it freeze in place, like a frame in an abandoned reel of film, perfectly formed but never seen? Let's look at the idea of a message. When you speak, when you write, when you send a signal across the stars, you do so with the hope of being received. Time is what makes that communication possible. A cause must lead to an effect. A sender must precede a receiver. But photons, light, don't recognize that order. They exist only at the endpoints. They are born, they are absorbed, and to them nothing lies between. Yet they carry meaning. They encode information. They define the very flow of data through every fiber optic cable, every biological eye, every interstellar telescope. So we ask again, how can something with no duration carry the essence of sequence? Perhaps that's the trick. Perhaps light doesn't need to remember. We do. The memory exists not in the message, but in the receiver. The sequence exists not in the photon, but in the mind that interprets it. We impose time onto light's presence. We are the clocks. We are the editors, the narrators, stitching fragments into a timeline. And light, ever silent, ever still, is merely the ink that makes the pattern visible. That makes the question even more strange. Does light carry the truth of time, or are we projecting time onto light like a shadow puppet cast on a wall? It could be that all our concepts of before and after, of signal and reply, of the slow procession of moments, are emergent properties dependent on the medium of our perception. And if perception needs time, then anything that doesn't require it, like light, will always seem foreign, almost sacred. Sacred not in the religious sense, but in the way that some things feel too fundamental to question. You don't wonder what light is every time you switch on a lamp. You don't ponder the nature of photons as you stare up at the stars. And yet, those tiny particles, those massless messengers, are the very reason you see anything at all. Without them, vision would collapse. Reality as we know it would vanish into darkness, not just visually, but structurally. Light defines interaction. It gives boundaries to the formless, and in quantum physics, this interaction becomes even more baffling. A photon does not take a single, predetermined path. It takes every possible path simultaneously in a vast and incomprehensible wave of probability. Only when it is measured, when it is received, does it settle. It chooses. It collapses. But between emission and absorption, it is many things at once, many directions, many times, or maybe no time at all. So now we see time not only stretched, but superposed, not just flowing, but branching. At quantum scales, the universe is not a single timeline, but a tangled forest of possibilities. And again, light plays the central role, not just illuminating these branches, but creating the very interference that tells us they exist. Without time, choice loses meaning. But without light, we'd never know a choice was made. This loops us back to the beginning. Does time exist at the speed of light? Maybe the question itself is flawed. Maybe it's like asking what warmth feels like to fire. Time for light is not absent. It's irrelevant. It's not delayed. It's undefined. Light doesn't exist within time any more than a line exists within a point. It is of a different category. It touches time, maps it, guides it, but never enters it. Yet in that distance lies a strange intimacy, because we, who live trapped within time's flow, need light to understand it. We need something that stands outside the storm to show us its shape. Like a satellite watching the ocean, light orbits our reality without ever swimming in its currents. And still, its reflection teaches us how the waves roll. Maybe that's the deepest function of light, not just to reveal what's in front of us, but to whisper what lies beneath. To show us that what we take as permanent, sequence, motion, becoming, may be only a projection cast on a deeper structure, a stillness masquerading as movement, a timelessness posing as history. And what does that mean for our dreams? For the internal theater that plays behind closed eyes, even now as you drift further into sleep? Your mind keeps making stories. You move through imagined spaces, hear imagined voices. But in dreams, time bends. Minutes feel like hours. Hours vanish in seconds. Perhaps dreaming is the closest we come to touching that other side, a place where time loosens, where perception untethers, where photons don't just illuminate, but dissolve the walls of waking thought. Even now, as this story winds through your awareness, you may begin to lose track of where the last idea ended and the next begins. That's part of the design. We're pacing with the photon now, not in speed, but in silence, in continuity, in the unbroken thread that needs no segments to be whole. You don't have to understand every line. You don't have to hold on. Just drift. Just let go. Because if light doesn't pause to feel time, then why do we feel the pause so deeply? Why does the wait matter to us? The delay, the sequence, the unfolding of cause into effect. Why do we measure time in stories, in memories, in milestones, while light races past all that, untouched and unburdened? Is it because we need the unfolding to understand? Or is it because we are the unfolding itself, not passengers of time, but its very expression? Let's look at how we use light, how it becomes the backbone of our measurement of time itself. The most precise clocks in the world don't tick with gears and springs anymore. They tick with light. Atomic clocks use the oscillations of light waves emitted by atoms to mark the passage of time. Each tick is defined by how many times light waves vibrate. In other words, we've defined our seconds, our very units of time, by something that doesn't experience time at all. The irony is almost poetic. We anchor our fleeting existence to the beat of something that never beats. It's as if time, for us, is something we extract from timelessness. We draw the rhythm from light, not because light gives it freely, but because we impose our rhythm onto its constancy. Light pulses, but it doesn't wait. It cycles, but it doesn't pause. We are the ones who hear the beat. We are the ones who feel the space between. And yet, when we send messages across cities, across continents, as across planets, we use light, fiber optics, radio waves, laser pulses, all forms of light, all rushing forward at that same unwavering speed. They don't slow down for meaning. They don't care about urgency. Whether the message is a cry for help or a birthday wish, the light carries it the same, without bias, without judgment, without a single tick of awareness. But for us, those messages exist only because we expect them to arrive. We wait. We calculate the delay. We imagine the signal's journey, its time in transit. Even if the light doesn't feel the passage, we do. We assign it context. We attach hope, anxiety, longing to its invisible motion. We fill the timeless gap with meaning. And that's what makes light so strange. It holds meaning without ever knowing it. It brings understanding without understanding. It transmits knowledge, and yet has none. It is the perfect courier, silent, constant, indifferent. And perhaps it is this indifference that allows it to define so much of what we call reality. Let's not forget, light doesn't just travel through space. It reveals space. It gives it structure. It tells us where things are, how far they've moved, how they've changed. In darkness, space collapses. Direction disappears. Without light, there's no horizon, no outline, no distinction between near and far. Light isn't just how we see space. It's how space becomes visible at all. And that goes for time, too. We watch the sky not just to see stars, but to see their pasts. Every twinkle is a ghost, a moment long gone, still arriving. Some of the light you see tonight began its journey before humans walked the earth. It brings no story of its own, but you turn it into one. You imagine its source, its journey, its age. You imagine a photon traveling for billions of years, only to be caught by your eye, by your attention, in this quiet moment just before sleep. And in that moment, the light becomes more than light. It becomes memory. Not its own memory, but yours. You remember the way the stars looked when you were younger. You remember the lamps glowing outside your childhood window. You remember the first time you understood that light has speed, that it is an instant, that it has to travel. And all those memories give light a kind of life, not in itself, but through you. That's the paradox. Light, which is timeless, becomes a marker of time the moment it touches us. It defines our rhythms, our records, our recollections. We track the flicker of lightning. We measure the dimming of distant suns. We even set our calendars by the light's return. The solstices, the seasons, the shadows on our walls, all shaped by light, all giving structure to the time we feel. But does light know what it creates? No. It simply is. It moves, it bends, it reaches, and we build significance in its wake. Maybe that's why we continue to send signals into deep space, not just to make contact, but to extend our presence into the timelessness. We launch light into the void as a way of saying, we were here. Not because we expect a reply, but because we hope that somewhere, someday, someone might see our flicker. That even if we're gone, the light we sent will carry our echo endlessly. But light doesn't keep echoes. It doesn't store intent. It doesn't remember the senders. It only connects endpoints. It brings message to receiver, and then it vanishes, used up, absorbed, forgotten. Its journey never experienced by itself, only by those who trace its absence. So perhaps we should stop thinking of light as a traveler. Perhaps it's not a journeyer at all, but a bridge, a momentary connection between things that experience time and things that do not. A quiet link, a stillness stretched between points of meaning. And if that's true, then maybe the universe isn't built from motion, but from relation, from connections, from the quiet tension between things. And light, always passing through, always linking, becomes the thread that binds the tapestry, not with color, but with contact. Which means that even now, in this drifting moment, as you breathe more slowly and let your thoughts settle, you're not alone in time. You're stitched to countless others by light. Every signal you receive, every star you glimpse, every dream sparked by the glow behind your eyes, all of it shaped by something that knows no past, no future, and yet, in shaping your worlds, it allows you to shape time. Light doesn't create stories, but it illuminates the canvas where stories are painted. It doesn't remember, but it carries the image of memory. It doesn't age, yet it ages everything it touches. A beam of sunlight fades the ink in your favorite book. A flicker of starlight travels across billions of years, only to settle quietly on your pillow. You, the dreamer, the perceiver, give those photons their final role. You're not their destination, not in any conscious sense, but you are the one who gives their presence meaning. There's a strange intimacy in that, to be the thing that transforms the meaningless into meaning. Because if light itself feels nothing, then everything it does only becomes real when it touches something that does. And that, in a way, makes us its co-authors, partners in perception. Translators of a language light has no mouth to speak. Even now, in the quiet hush of your room, you are being touched by light that may have taken years, centuries, millennia to arrive. Photons released in distant places, from stars long dead, from galaxies hurtling away, arrive now with no announcement, no history, no delay in their own view. And yet they arrive just in time for your eyes, for your mind, for this very breath. There's no magic in the physics of that, only inevitability. But there is something astonishing in the timing, in the idea that light, blind and thoughtless, orchestrates so many moments of beauty. And what do we do with that light? We draw with it. We build telescopes and cameras and projectors. We use it to map atoms and scan brains. We harness it in our fiber cables, our smartphones, our GPS systems. Well, light is the thread we sew into our machines, our art, our medicine. We don't just see with it, we think through it. We connect through it. It's not just a medium. It's part of the architecture of our modern minds. But underneath all that, it remains as strange as ever, still massless, still ageless, still indifferent. It bends around gravity wells and dances on the edge of black holes. It carries the secrets of the universe in its color, its direction, its shift. And we read those secrets not because light tells them to us, but because it holds them like a mirror, silent, utterly silent, and yet revealing everything. Perhaps that's why light is such a central metaphor in so many traditions. Enlightenment, illumination, seeing the light. We don't just mean visibility, we mean understanding, truth, insight. But the metaphor becomes slippery when you realize that light, in itself, understands nothing. It's the ultimate blank, and somehow, that blankness allows us to see everything. This isn't just poetry, it's in the science too. The visible spectrum, the thin sliver of electromagnetic waves our eyes can detect, is a mere fraction of what's out there. Infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, gamma rays, radio waves, all forms of light, all carrying information, all invisible unless we build tools to notice them. We are tuned by evolution and biology to just a narrow window. We call that window reality. But it's only a slice, and even within that slice, we do strange things. We bend light through lenses, splitting it into color. We reflect it, refract it, polarize it. We create laser pulses so precise they can measure a distance smaller than a proton's width. We stretch it across the globe in fiber optic networks. We trap it in mirrors, bounce it inside crystals, slow it to a crawl in cold atomic clouds. We turn it into bits, into images, into voices. We've tamed light, or so we tell ourselves. But deep down, we know we haven't. Not really. We work with it, but we don't know where it's been. We describe its properties, but we can't explain its core. Is it a wave? A particle? Well, both. Neither. It behaves one way when we measure it one way, and another when we measure it differently. It seems to collapse into certainty only when we demand an answer. Until then, it's all possibility. It is the flicker that exists in all states at once, until we open our eyes. And that's what brings us, gently, to a quiet realization. We talk about light as if it's something out there, moving, arriving, illuminating. But what if it's also in here? What if the experience of light is not just external, but internal? After all, photons hit the retina, but what you see is not the photon. It's the result, the cascade of biological and neural responses. The signal that travels from the eye to the brain, from the brain to the mind, from the mind to the story. The sensation of brightness, of color, of shape, none of it is in the light itself. It's all in the translation. So maybe light is not the message, but the medium for meaning. Maybe the experience of light is what happens when timelessness touches time and leaves a ripple, a whisper, a footprint that isn't really a foot, but a shift in awareness. You don't see the light, you see what it changes. And just like that, the question reshapes itself. Does time exist at the speed of light, or is light the boundary, the seam between time and its absence, between motion and stillness, between knowing and unknowing? We may never cross that seam, but we don't have to, because every time you open your eyes, you stand at its edge. And yet, the edge never feels like an edge. It's more like a breath, a thin veil between what is illuminated and what remains in shadow. You live your life brushing against it constantly. Every glance at a star, every flicker of sunlight on the wall, every reflection in a mirror is an encounter with something utterly still and utterly swift. Light touches everything, and in that contact, your world is built piece by piece. Yet none of it belongs to the light. It moves on. Or perhaps more precisely, it doesn't move at all. It simply connects. Consider a shadow, not the absence of light, but the place where light was meant to be and isn't. The imprint of interruption. Shadows stretch, flicker, dissolve. We track time by them. Sundials, silhouettes, fading lines on the ground all tell us not just where the sun is, but where it was. And yet, again, the light that created those shadows knows nothing of delay. It does not pause to watch its absence being measured. It does not feel the irony of being defined by its interruption. Still, we rely on those gaps to understand time. A shadow is meaningful only because it changes, and it changes only because light, indifferent and eternal, keeps falling. It is this endless contradiction that something changeless gives rise to all change, that keeps returning like a soft wave in the background of thought. It's the same with memories. Every snapshot in your mind, a child's smile, the shimmer of pavement after rain, the way dusk softened the color of someone's voice, all of them were shaped by light. But you don't remember the photon. You remember the arrangement, the scene, the feeling that lingered after the light was gone. Light initiates, you interpret. This distinction matters because it reminds us that while light operates outside of time, we don't. We are slow machines for whom memory is everything. We require sequence. We need difference. We track change like a heartbeat, and from that change we create meaning. Without time, there would be no language, no music, no sense of next. And yet, the thing that allows us to perceive all of this, light, doesn't participate. It never joins the song. It only hands us the first note. Now think of the horizon at dusk, the sun slipping below, the sky deepening, colors bleeding outward in slow gradients. It feels like the world is exhaling. But the light that paints that horizon left the sun minutes earlier. The sun you see is not the sun that is. Even that peaceful moment is already a memory by the time it reaches you. You are always seeing what was, not what is. Light allows you to witness, but never in real time. You are always behind. And yet, there is peace in that delay. Something reassuring in the idea that light is always arriving, always filling in the canvas just a little too late. It means the present isn't sharp. It has edges that blur. It means that the now you feel is really a collage of yesterdays, stitched together by particles that never knew they were traveling. Perhaps this is why light is such a powerful metaphor in art, in thought, in longing. It behaves like memory, intangible, unstoppable, outside of time yet deeply tied to it. You chase light and it flees. You wait for it and it floods. You try to hold it and it slips through everything, like a dream, like a thought, like time itself. And then there are mirrors, strange devices. You stand before one and light reflects off your face, bounces off the glass, and returns to your eyes. In that loop, that instant ricochet, you see yourself not as you are, but as you were a fraction of a moment ago, infinitesimally delayed, always slightly behind. And yet, it feels like now. It feels like presence, even though time has already ticked forward. We believe we are looking at ourselves, but we are always looking at where we used to be. Just as the stars above are not current, but ancestral. Just as every photon landing softly on your blanket tonight carries a history that it cannot remember, but that you can infer. We are constantly assembling time from the fragments of things that don't know what time is. And somehow, that makes our sense of now even more precious. It's not a gift from light, it's a construction, a delicate balancing act of memory, perception, interpretation. You feel present not because the universe offers it to you, but because you build it from ingredients that don't possess it. Time isn't handed to you. You carve it out of a continuous silence. Maybe that's why the speed of light is the ultimate ceiling, not just in physics, but in meaning. To go faster would mean undoing time, undoing causality, undoing story. And so we are held back, not by force, but by design. Because beyond that speed, there is no sequence. And without sequence, there is no self. But light keeps arriving anyway, quiet, relentless, eternal, and in its silence it outlines all that we are, every emotion lit by the gleam in someone's eye, every word read under a lamp, every distant galaxy traced by the faintest whisper of ancient photons. We are slow, we are bound, but through light we glimpse the edge of the boundless. So perhaps the question isn't, what is light without time? Perhaps it's what are we through time because of light? If light is constant, if it never ages, never forgets, and never waits, then maybe time is what we make in the wake of its touch. Like ripples in a pond after a stone has passed through, not carried by the stone itself, but stirred by its passing. We, then, are not just creatures within time, but the very patterns that light leaves behind when it brushes against matter. We are echoes shaped by stillness, waves carved into memory by something that never remembers. In this way, light is not only the seam between here and there, it is the silent author of every now. When photons strike the skin, the eye, the leaf, they cause things to happen, chemical reactions, electrical impulses, patterns of growth. These are not timeless. These are deeply rooted in sequence, in duration. Light doesn't age, but the things it touches do. And perhaps that's the only way we come to know that time exists at all, through the things that are changed by the unchanging. But what if this flow of change isn't linear? What if time, as we feel it, is not the same as time as it is? When we dream, when we remember, when we long, time stretches and compresses. A second can hold a century of thought. A year can pass in a blink. Our internal time is not a clock. It's an ocean, tidal, surging, receding. And yet light flows through it all without ever joining the tide. It touches both our waking and our dreaming selves with equal indifference. Even in physics, time is not an absolute stream. Einstein showed us that time is relative. It bends and warps. It slows near mass and speeds away from it. It isn't fixed. It reacts to context. And yet, through every context, light remains constant. Always the same speed, always the same path, as if it were not moving through time at all, but only through the space left behind when time fails to hold it. This constancy is what makes light a paradox. It is both movement and stillness, both energy and silence, both messenger and message. It connects things, but is itself never connected. It makes visibility possible, yet remains invisible in its own frame. It is the silent condition for our sense of presence. And if light defines presence, then it also defines absence, the places it doesn't reach, the things it doesn't touch, the spaces it leaves behind. A shadow is not just a lack of light, it's a record of interruption. It's time made visible through delay. In that way, we don't just see with light. We see by its absence. We see the places where it was blocked, filtered, slowed. Time is revealed in the waiting. Even in deep space, far from stars, light is always moving, not wandering, not searching, just extending, just being. And through its being, space is known. Galaxies shimmer not because they burn, but because light travels. It crosses chasms so wide we can't comprehend them, and yet when it arrives, it does so with no trace of having traveled. A photon from a quasar 4 billion light years away doesn't age on its path. It begins and ends. But we, in seeing it, feel the gap. We feel the age. We look into the past, even though light never left the present. What kind of present is that? One where distance has no meaning, where delay has no presence, where the idea of waiting is erased. It is a present outside of narrative, outside of growth. And perhaps that's why we don't belong there. Because to be conscious, to have a self, is to accumulate, to carry a past forward into a possible future. Light does not carry, we do. That burden, that privilege, that's what creates identity. That's what gives rise to time. So when we stare into the night sky, we are not just looking at light. We are looking at difference, at passage, at memory made visible. And even though that light doesn't remember where it came from, we do. We piece together the story. We turn the flicker into a tale, the glow into a question, the photon into a legacy. Even now, as you lie there, eyes closed or barely open, you are surrounded by photons, some from your lamp, some from your screen, some from the cosmic microwave background, the oldest light in the universe, born just after the Big Bang. That light has never stopped. It's been moving ever since, unchanged. And tonight, it happens to be here, brushing your room with a signal you can't see, but that scientists have spent decades learning how to measure. That light is part of your world, even though it exists outside your sense of time. And maybe that's the most beautiful part of it all, that something so silent, so indifferent, can still shape a moment like this, a quiet unfolding of thought, of imagination, of drifting sleep, that you, wrapped in layers of memory and breath, can feel wonder because of something that has never once paused to wonder itself. So does time exist at the speed of light? Maybe that question has no answer. Maybe it only has a doorway, one that leads not to certainty, but to reflection. And maybe, as you lie here listening, you're standing at that doorway now, not to step through it, but to rest beside it. Because while light may never rest, you do. You pause, you reflect, you drift through the slow folds of thought and feeling that light can never touch. You move not through space, but through a story. And that story, your story, is built entirely within time. It has a beginning, a middle, and somewhere far ahead an end. Light will outlive all of it. It won't notice your rising or your fading, but it will illuminate each moment along the way, as if the universe granted you just enough of its silence to make meaning. That's the strange truth. We live at a speed light can never join, not because we are fast, but because we are slow, because we need the delay. We need the gap between thought and word, between cause and effect, between heartbeat and breath. That gap is what lets us feel. To compress everything into a single instant, to become timeless, would be to lose the very sensation of being alive. And still, we envy light. We dream of moving faster, escaping the drag of age, the erosion of memory, the tension of waiting. We build machines to push us further, to shorten the time between desire and fulfillment. We try to outrun the limitations of flesh. And each time we succeed a little more, light is already ahead, not because it moved faster, but because it never stopped. Yet what would we become if we caught up? Not beings of insight, but beings of collapse. Because all insight depends on distance. Understanding takes time. Grief takes time. Love takes time. Even a sigh needs time to form. Without time, there is no unfolding, only static completeness, sterile and eternal. Light lives in that completeness, but we live in process, in the long arc of becoming. We aren't flashes, we are fire, burning slowly, steadily through the hours, lighting the path not instantly, but one flickering step at a time. And maybe in that contrast, something sacred appears, not because it's divine, but because it's rare. In a universe of photons that know no waiting, we wait, we linger. We turn to one another and say, "Let me tell you what happened." That sentence alone, that impulse to share a sequence, is the root of civilization. It is the fabric of identity. Even now, in this moment, you're participating in that same act. You followed a thread spun from light and sound and imagination. You've allowed yourself to be drawn along by words that stretch across paragraphs, each one shaped by time. You couldn't take in the entire story at once, even if you tried. Your mind demands sequence. That's what gives the journey its shape. And what a shape it is, spiraling outward from a simple question into reflections that touch physics, memory, and meaning. That question, does time exist at the speed of light, is not just about particles. It's about perception, about whether something must feel time in order to be part of it, and whether the parts of the universe that escape time still shape those of us who are bound within it. The answer, as always, may not lie in certainty, but in observation. And what we observe is this: light moves without aging. We, by contrast, cannot stop aging even when we stand still. Light is the path. We are the travelers. It is the map, the signal, the flare in the darkness that shows us how far we've come. But it is never the journey. That part is ours alone, so we follow it, not to become it, but to learn from it, to measure our slowness not as a flaw, but as a gift. Because in slowness we notice, we remember, we ache, we laugh. We watch sunsets fade instead of appearing all at once. We reach across distances that light crosses instantly, but we feel every inch of them. And in that feeling, we become more than particles. We become persons. That's the boundary light cannot cross, not the physical one, but the inner one, the realm of story, of emotion, of memory. It can describe the temperature of your skin, but not the meaning of a touch. It can outline a face, but not the memory it carries. It can pass through your world without leaving a scratch, and yet through you, it leaves marks that never fade. Perhaps that's what light truly does. Not experience, not carry, but provoke. It starts things in motion. It begins reactions. It triggers change, and it leaves before the change is complete. It never sees the ending. That's left to you. And so, as you rest now, drifting further into that soft, timeless space of sleep, know this: the light outside your window is still falling, still arriving, still painting the walls with silent signals. It doesn't know the time, but it gives you the chance to feel it, to live it, to stretch one breath into the next with the full knowledge that you are not frozen. You are becoming. And maybe in the softest part of that becoming, you glimpse something that doesn't need to be understood to be real. a kind of presence that has nothing to do with explanation, with logic, or with destination. Just the sensation of continuing, of existing moment by moment, each one shaped gently by a world you're always slightly behind, always slightly ahead of, never quite catching in full. And that, perhaps, is the quiet answer hiding beneath our long spiral of thought. That time does not exist at the speed of light, not because it's forbidden, but because it's irrelevant. And that irrelevance is not a flaw in the structure of the universe. It's a clue to its depth. Because we, the slow ones, the feelers of moments, are built to turn irrelevance into meaning. We build calendars from shadows, draw memories from photons, feel longing from signals that never waited for us to feel anything at all. Light remains unchanging, but our experience of it changes everything. The beam doesn't care, but we care endlessly about where it came from, about how long it took, about what it touched before it touched us. We write poems about starlight. We grieve at sunsets. We fall in love by candlelight and mourn under street lamps. And that is why this story had to unfold slowly. Why we couldn't answer the question at once, in a flash of fact. Because we are not photons. We are not capable of arriving instantly. Our truth is in the unfolding, in the wondering, in the way ideas shape each other across minutes, across paragraphs, across quiet rooms filled with waiting. We need to circle things like planets around a sun. We need to feel the orbit, not just the center. The question, does time exist at the speed of light, only matters because we are made of time. Asking it lets us hold our boundaries up to the light and not just see them, but understand what lies just beyond. And what lies beyond is not silence, not absence, but something else. A canvas we will never step onto, but one we can still trace with imagination. The realm where light lives, where beginning and end are one, where motion and stillness collapse, where experience as we know it has no foothold. It is not for us, and yet it surrounds us, holds us, illuminates us, even now. Perhaps that is the gift of light, not that it joins us in time, but that it keeps showing us time's edges. It shows us where the line between becoming and being begins to blur. It shows us that the universe is not one rhythm, but many, stacked, layered, spiraling, and that somewhere beyond our own spirals, something else endures, still, swift, silent. We do not envy that stillness anymore. We respect it because now we see what it costs, the absence of memory, of sequence, of presence as we feel it. Light's clarity is not a comfort. It is a kind of forgetting, and we are not ready to forget. We want to feel every part of time, even the painful ones. We want to linger in the delay, to trace every contour of the unfolding, no matter how slow. So we stay here, not trapped, but grounded, held by gravity, anchored by clocks and pulses and breath. We do not chase light, we receive it, gently, with awe. We turn it into dreams and meaning and warmth. And as we do, we remember something deeper than knowledge, that it is okay not to move at the speed of light, that it is okay to take time, to be time. You are not a beam. You are not a burst. You are a flame. You burn across a span that light would never bother to notice. You feel change. You carry the weight of before and the promise of after, and in doing so, you do what no photon can. You live. So rest now, in this light, in this breath, in this slow, magnificent passage called now. You've touched something that never waits, and found that waiting is what makes it beautiful. You've stared into stillness and found that motion is what gives it form. And maybe when you close your eyes, you'll carry that stillness with you, not as an answer, but as a rhythm, a silence, a drifting presence that watches the universe unfold and does not need to hurry, because you are the traveler, and the light was always just the path